What's up, you guys? Stoopzz back again with another video. And as everyone is covering all this Battle for Azeroth nonsense, that Resident Sleeper content. Alright, I'm salty because I can't play the alpha. But we still have 1 year of Legion left, and somebody's got to make these guides. So, as a lot of you know, I've been practicing, well, maybe some of you don't know, but a lot of you might know that I've been practicing a lot of Discipline Priest. I actually really like playing the Discipline Priest. So I figure what better way to kick off this guide series than to make a Discipline Priest guide. My first disc guide, mind you, ever. And it is actually one of my favorite healers to play so far in this entire expansion. It was a little confusing at first, but I think I am ready to present a guide to all of you. So just like all my previous guides in the past, in this guide we're going to cover our general talents, our honor talents, and I'll go over some tips and tricks that you guys can use when playing this class, as well as some arena comps and my general thoughts. So hopping right into our general talents first, for level 15 you have Twist of Fate and Castigation. I'm not really good at reading. Typically, your go-to is going to be Twist of Fate. Basically, after you heal a target that falls below 35% health, you gain 20% increased healing and damage for 10 seconds. Now, this is a great ability when you're falling behind. It also helps out with your damage output. It's great in 2s and 3s, and if you're just starting out with this class, you're going to find a lot of value in Twist of Fate. It makes healing a little bit easier on the class. However, once you get used to the class, you can mess around with Castigation. It allows you basically to get an extra penance off when you're channeling the spell. You get an extra bolt like you saw there. That's going to allow for increased healing and damage. Castigation actually allows for a little bit more spread healing, a little bit more AoE healing, because you get that extra penance off, and if you have your atonements up on all your targets, you will get the extra bolt off, which will help stabilize the group a little bit easier. But again, if you're really falling behind and you're struggling with healing, you can opt for Twist of Fate, which is generally, again, your go-to. Now for level 30, it's a little bit tricky here. Personally, for me, I like Angelic Feather. It just allows me to move across the map a lot faster. It's that movement speed increase that you see Disc Priest getting. It allows me to move in for fears, get out of line of sight, maybe line certain things. So I prefer Angelic Feather almost all the time. But you're probably wondering, why not Body and Soul? Well, Body and Soul is great. It gives you movement speed on your powered shield, and you can also put that on your allies as well. But it really serves more as a purge protection. When you use your shield, you get this buff, and it will give you that little 3-second window where you have an extra layer of buffs on your ally or on yourself. So if you're getting purged after you shield, they're going to have to purge an extra time to get off that debuff. However, the movement speed increase that you get from Body and Soul, in my opinion, is not as good as Angelic Feather. It doesn't last as long. It only lasts 3 seconds, and it's applied on your powered shield. So sometimes maybe you want to shield yourself, but then you're going to need movement speed maybe a couple seconds after that, and you don't have your shield up. So with Feather, you get 3 charges of it. So you can just activate your Feather and then get that additional movement speed. Now, I could never pronounce this word when I first started playing this class. It's actually Masochism. I used to call it Mechanicism. I don't know why. But basically, the way it works is you lose a lot of mobility when you play this talent. You're not going to have Body and Soul. You're not going to have Feather. So you're going to be like a slow potato trying to sift and weave your way through the arena. However, if you are getting trained on, if you're getting dumped on by double melee, if you feel like you're in a Tues match and you do not need that mobility and you're just getting trained over and over again and you're falling behind and you're the reason why your team is losing, you're always dying, then opt for Masochism. It might help you out. Basically, the way it works is when you cast your Shadow Mend, you will get a defensive buff on you. It reduces all damage you take by 10%. On top of that, Shadow Mend has a baked-in mechanic that the ally will take 33,000 damage every 1 second until they have taken a total of 338,000. Now with Masochism, it kind of flips that around, and instead of taking damage, you receive an additional hot. So it just boosts the overall healing on yourself when using Shadow Mend, and it makes you a little bit tankier. So if you are getting trained, try this talent out. But again, I almost always prefer playing Angelic Feather. Now for level 45, you have 2 options here. You have Shining Force and Psychic Voice. Shining Force is that knockback that you'll see people use in Battlegrounds. It's really good on like Blade's Edge Arena, but a lot of the time when you're playing Discipline Priest, you are reliable for landing your fears. Psychic Voice reduces the cooldown of your Psychic Scream, your AoE fear, and in RMP, jungle, comps like that, you are expected to land fears off CC. So a shorter cooldown on your fear is usually the way to go. But again, if you're playing on different kinds of maps that have maybe, is it a Z axis or an X axis? I never know, where it goes up and down. On those maps, you can opt for Shining Force, but most of the time your go-to is going to be Psychic Voice. Now on level 60, when I first started, and this is what I recommend most players do, when you first start off on your Disc Priest, just pick up Mindbender. This talent row is basically a way for you to get back your mana. Now, Disc Priest used to have a lot of issues with mana. They kind of still do, but not as much as they used to in the past, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But with these 3 options, they're built in to help you get your mana back. Now, the easiest one to use is Mindbender. It's this little pet that you'll summon. You'll throw out the pet, and basically this pet will walk around. It's on a 1-minute cooldown, and it will beat things up up, and it will give you a percentage of your mana every time it hits something. So this is generally easy to use, and it seems pretty simple. The problem with this is Mindbender never connects all the time. Sometimes it gets stuck, sometimes they get rid of it, sometimes it just walks around and hits random things, or it's getting kited the whole time. So for me personally, I started out with Mindbender, and then I moved my way onto using Power Word Solace. Power Word Solace is my go-to. It's the ability I prefer for both 2s and 3s. So when you choose Mindbender, it actually replaces your Shadow Fiend ability. So then when you opt to use Power Word Solace, you get to keep your Shadow Fiend ability. Shadow Fiend innately hits a lot harder than Mindbender. Granted, it's a 3-minute cooldown, but it allows for a lot of extra burst damage, which will result in a lot of burst healing. And on top of that, Solace itself does a lot of damage. Power Word Solace is a simple instant cast ability with a 10-second cooldown, and it does a lot of damage. Now, every time you use it, you get 1% of your maximum mana back. Now, that does not seem like a lot. However, keep in mind, it is instant. You don't have to cast anything, and it's a 10-second cooldown. But on top of that, it does a lot of damage, which will translate into extra healing. So if you have Atonement on yourself perhaps, or your allies, and then you opt to use like a penance into Power Word Solace, that has a lot of extra burst damage, which will help stabilize your entire team, especially if you're playing Trinity. And it's just fun to use. It's fun to do extra damage. It allows for you to help set up kills, finish off targets, and just again, I found that it helps for a lot of extra AoE healing across your team, which sometimes when you start playing your Discipline Priest, it feels kind of hard to stabilize your entire team, but with this ability, it's not so difficult. So again, if you're new, I recommend just trying Mindbender at first, and once you get comfortable with your damage rotation, your healing rotation, you can opt to add in Power Word Solace. Now for level 75, I always go Clarity of Will. I know some of my friends, or Jesse, one of my friends, he loves to play Sanctuary and Tues. It basically works where when you use your smite, you get the increased absorption effect. When you use smite on a target, you absorb some of their outgoing damage. I still don't like it. He's really good at using it, but I prefer to play Clarity of Will. It's that shield effect that you will see. It almost looks like Pain Suppression, and Priest will use this ability when you lock them on Shadow Men and things like that. It just offers another heal ability outside of Penance and Shield when you do get locked on your Shadow Men. For level 90, I opt for Purge the Wicked. It's that little holy fire looking dot that you see. The way this works is, think of it as Renew. Back in the day when you'd play a priest, you had an ability called Renew, and you'd put it on your allies. It was like an additional hot, and Holy Priest still have that ability. Well, when you have Atonement on your allies, you heal every time you do damage. So the more of these little holy fire, Purge the Wicked dots you have up, it's almost like an AoE Renew across your team. Just as long as you keep it up, and you keep up your Atonement, it's just an AoE Renew, and you're also dealing damage at the same time. And this again helps with spread pressure and just stabilizing your team overall. Now for level 100, you're never going to spec out of Grace. It's the overall better talent. Basically the way it works on targets with Atonement, you will increase your non-Atonement healing as well as your absorption effects by 30%. So shields, even your penance perhaps, it's going to increase all of that healing, and it allows for those massive shields that you will see, Clarity of Will, things like that. So you're never going to spec out of Grace. It's really powerful, and there is no other option in my opinion that's anywhere near as good. Now going into our honor talents, I almost always like playing Gladiator's Medallion. When the expansion first started, people were playing a lot of Relentless, but now I just find Gladiator's Medallion just to be the overall safer pick in almost every situation, so that's what I choose there. For the next bracket, when I started off playing Disc, I recommend playing Defender of the Weak. Now again, this is just starting off. I almost always use Vim and Vigor. I feel like on your Priest, it's so important to keep up Vim. It's 20% extra healing, above 80% health, and it just allows for that more aggressive playstyle. And even against rock comps, I prefer to still play Vim. I'll sit back as far as I can, and I'll just do whatever it takes to keep up Vim, to keep my team aggressive, to pump out bigger heals. And when playing Vim, it allows me to stay up above 80% health as well, because I am pumping out bigger heals, so it's harder to even take me down. So I prefer playing Vim almost always. But again, if you are new to Disc, I recommend trying out Defender of the Weak, and you can work yourself up to playing Vim, and then you'll find that you almost never want to spec out of it. Now this bracket is kind of interesting, this next one over here. It basically revolves around your Dispel ability. It's called Purify in this expansion, but each of these affect that ability differently. I almost always go with Purified Resolve or Purification. If I know I have to double Dispel a lot, like in a Tues match versus a Shadow Priest, or it's just a lot of Rot, and I think I'm gonna have to Dispel a lot, like maybe they're gonna be mind bombing somebody or fearing somebody, or if they're gonna be locking down my allies a lot, right? Like those double polys, or maybe they're going to fear one guy and then poly another and just peel. This allows me to have 2 charges on my Dispel, so I can keep my team extremely offensive. But in other situations, I might opt for Purified Resolve, which works really well. It grants them an absorption shield for 5% of their maximum health for 8 seconds. So it just keeps my team a little bit tankier. It's an extra shield, an extra heal, however you want to phrase it. And if I don't need double the spell, I'll almost always will go with Purified Resolve. So be sure to pick these wisely, as they do make a big difference and they are very helpful. Now going on to the next bracket, I love Trinity. Trinity is insanely powerful currently. I think it really defines Discipline Priest, but there are some games you're going to have to play Premonition. Premonition is kind of like that Shadow Word Death effect. We used to have that back in like Burning Crusade. Shadow Priest would use Shadow Word Death if they're going to get polyed right before they got polyed, and it would cause damage to the priest and break them out of that poly. And that is why you're going to hear a lot of players saying, I death that poly. They mean Premonition. If you see someone casting a polymorph, he begins to cast polymorph and you see it coming, you will activate your Premonition on anything essentially, and it will do damage to you moments after it heals you. It will break that polymorph, that hex, that trap, but it's not very easy to land, and it's something that I'm still working on personally. But just keep in mind that most comps nowadays, like jungle for example, they might bash you and then trap you, so they're like, oh, we'll always spec into Premonition when you fight jungle. Sometimes it's not even worth it, because they're gonna always land a bash because they think you're running Prem and then trap you anyway. So it just depends on the matchup and the players you're fighting. So just kind of get a sense of what they're doing, and then you might be even better off using Trinity because you'll be healing for a little bit more. But Trinity in itself is a little confusing. When you spec into this ability, your abilities will no longer automatically apply atonement. So technically, if you were to shield somebody, so for example, I'm not in PvP combat, I'm going to shield myself and you will see that I do have atonement, right? But now when I get into PvP combat and I'm spec'd into Trinity, there is no more atonement. It will not automatically apply atonement. So the only way to apply atonement is to use your plea ability. So when you use plea and you're in PvP combat, right? I have Trinity going and I use plea, it will apply atonement, and it lasts 30 seconds versus the initial 15. So it lasts longer, but you have to manually apply it, okay? I'll tell you why this is good in a second. But on top of that, all of your healing transferred through atonement is increased by 20%. So if you have, you know, like your pleas on this, like this dude over here, I got it on this guy over here, and then I use, you know, for example, like a penance here, it's gonna heal for a lot more than before, 20% more in fact, because I'm using Trinity. So you can do a lot more damage, and you'll be able to heal through that damage. And with Powered Solace and all of your little dots going on, it's really, really powerful in Arena. But on top of that, the reason why I think this ability is so good for Arena, not so good for RBGs, but in Arena, is because it really reminds you that you have to keep up your plea all of the time. Again, with things like Grace, you're gonna be getting bonus healing and bonus shields through your atonement, so you want to make sure you have it on them before you really use anything. So you're still manually applying plea anyway. So for example, if I shield myself right now, it's going to shield me for like 800k. But if I make sure I have my plea on myself before, and then that being atonement, and then shield myself, it's 1200 or 1.2 million. God, I'm bad at math, but it's 1.2 million. So it is a lot more powerful to keep up plea always. You always want to make sure that you have your atonement up through plea, and then you shield them for the bonus shield. So with Trinity, it's already getting you in the habit of making sure you reapply your pleas anyway. And a lot of people forget that, and you kind of lose track of that when you're spec'd into the other abilities, because all of your other things like shields already apply atonement. So I think for beginners, it's a really good spec or talent to spec into, because it will get you in the habit of keeping up your pleas, your atonements prior to using shields and things like that. But again, Premonition is still really good when fighting mages and other classes that can CC you, that can be broken with damage. Now for this next bracket, you have Strength and Soul and Ultimate Radiance. These are the two solid options here. Ultimate Radiance, you saw a lot. I think it was like season 3 or season 2. I can't remember exactly, but it was that little instant powered radiance that you would see that would AoE heal everyone around them, and it did a lot of healing, and it worked a little bit differently back then. Now it's been kind of nerfed a little bit. It still heals for a lot, but it will you very, very fast. So I only spec into this instant AoE heal when I'm fighting you know, something that has a lot of raw, and I want to keep my team offensive, right? If I'm fighting like maybe a Boomkin Shadow Priest or something like that, and I want to keep them very, very offensive, and I'm not really worried about mana, and I'm just trying to race the clock, and I'm trying to get them down as fast as we can, then maybe I will spec into instant powered radiance, maybe even versus jungle, for example. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but they have so much pressure, and I'm just trying to survive and get my team offensive. It just depends on the matchup. You can try out both. If you lost the first time playing Strength and Soul, but versus most melee comps, it gives your powered shield an instant heal, and on top of that, it reduces all physical damage that target takes by 20% as long as the shield persists. So basically, if you have a 1.2 million shield on somebody, while they're attacking into that 1.2 million shield, they're going to be dealing 20% less damage, which will essentially make the shield last longer, which might save you some mana and makes your allies a little bit tankier, and it's good for you as well, as it works really well with this ability called Focused Will. So if you are getting trained, make sure you spec into Strength and Soul, and that does stack up really well with Focused Will, which reduces the physical amount of damage you take when getting trained by melee classes. Now lastly, you have Archangel and Dark Archangel. When you're starting out, Archangel is going to be your best friend. Hopefully you have this ability. It's kind of rough until you get there, but it's very similar to like Paladin Wings or like Ascendant. It's your go-to kind of oh shit button when playing as a priest, but it's on a 1-minute cooldown, buffs all of your healing and your absorption effects by 30%. So it makes your shields really strong, it makes your heals hit really strong, and it's on a 1-minute cooldown. Another cool thing is it refreshes all of your atonements. So for example, if I'm in a party and I put up all of these atonements, and then I opt to use maybe Archangel here, it's gonna essentially refresh all those atonements. So it's a great way if you're falling behind and you can't get your atonement up in time and you want to stabilize your team. Maybe you'll opt to use Archangel, reset all of your atonements, and it will allow for that extra burst healing. Now Dark Archangel is a lot different. It's a very aggressive playstyle. You might use it if you're fighting with like an RMP and you're just going for the one-shot burst, maybe Arcane Assass. Maybe you're playing jungle and you just want to go full on ham. Everyone that has atonement on them, when you activate this ability, they will get a 15% damage increase. So it will buff your damage, it'll buff their damage, and on your go, for example, let's say you choose this ability, I'll get atonement on this little guy, and I'll get atonement on his wolf friend, and we're all going to go burst this guy down. I'll activate this ability, maybe I'll go for a Light's Wrath into a Penance, into a Powered Solace, and we're all doing 15% more damage. But again, if you are new to the class, I recommend Archangel, and this is kind of more of a cheesy ability that you might be able to get away with if you feel like you do not need that extra healing. So I just quickly want to cover some of the Discipline Priest abilities very fast here. So remember, one of the tips is that you always want to make sure you have atonement up before you shield anyone to increase the amount of absorption you get due to your ability called Grace. So do not let your atonements fall off. It's very important to always keep them up so you can keep doing damage to heal your overall team. Now on that same note, I remember when I started playing my priest, everyone kept telling me, all the Twitchful gladiators in my chat would be like, Stoopzz, you need to do more damage. You need to do more damage. You need to do more damage. And I'm like, man, I can't do damage. People are dying. Now, to some point, they were right. Like, if your whole team is dying, if all 3 life bars are going down, like all 3 of these guys are dying at the same time, then it is worth trying to do damage to stabilize your whole team as a whole. So if 3 people are dying, it's better off for me to penance the enemy to heal all 3 of my allies if atonement is up, than just to penance one guy individually. Even Light's Wrath, if you get locked on a certain ability, you can go right into Light's Wrath and do damage, and that will burst heal your whole team. But if somebody's individually dying, then yes, it's totally okay to use your penance to heal them up versus doing damage. Another important thing is, again, make sure you have your atonements up with Purge the Wicked. You're putting Purge the Wicked on pets, on all the enemies. You're keeping this dot up because it will act as a renew for this crab and his friend over here. It will keep them up because I'm doing a dot damage over time on the enemy. So that is a very important tactic to use, as sometimes you let them fall off and then your team starts to slowly melt a little bit faster. This will help stabilize your team much more efficiently. So again, keep that in mind. Just make sure you have your atonement on yourself. You have your atonement on this guy over here, and then you see an enemy and then you're all taking damage, or it's versus a rock comp, or you're all at like 70% health. You can easily go into a penance, into a Powered Solace, and you will bring almost everyone up to about 90 to even 100% depending on the amount of damage you did. And then when one person is dying, you can either penance them, you can look to shadow mend them. One thing I want to note here is you're looking to use or couple your powered shield with a shadow mend sometimes, because it will provide a lot more burst healing. Let me explain. If you were to sit here and cast 2 shadow mends back to back, you're not going to get as much burst healing as if you were to maybe make sure you have your atonement up here, you shadow mend into a shield, right? Because you're using that global cooldown to your advantage. As you cast shadow mend, your global cooldown comes off of your powered shield, and you can go right into your powered shield. If they have atonement, you will do a significant amount of healing, and you can go back to doing damage. Now, another thing I want to talk about is pain suppression. Pain suppression is not like Monk Cocoon or Monk Bubble. It will not pick somebody up if they're like 10%. You want to use pain suppression in a way to kind of predict incoming damage. The cool thing about pain suppression is it is castable while you're stunned. So for example, if you get stunned, you can PS your ally before you think they're going to take a bunch of damage, and it will mitigate 40% of the incoming damage. Now, one of your artifact traits here, Tyranny of Pain, Pain Suppression will also heal that ally for 33% of the damage taken during Pain Suppression. So that is a neat way to keep your ally from flopping over like a potato. And then I also want to talk about Barrier of the Devoted. When you're inside your powered barrier, this little dome here, people will receive additional 100% atonement heals. So if you're doing damage inside of your barrier, you're going to be healing for significantly more than if you were outside of the barrier. So put barrier on people, put it on yourself, and then try and go into doing your damage, as you will do damage and you will also heal 100% more. Now again, this guide is aimed to be a quick and easy guide. One of the last things I want to cover is Clarity of Will. When I first started playing my priest, I used to use Clarity of Will like a lot, and you only really will use Clarity of Will at the start of the match, and then as well as when you're kind of like top, like everyone's stabilized, maybe the team is peeling back and you want to restack shields, or if you're completely locked out on everything. So for example, if I get locked on Shadow and then I don't have a powered shield up and I've already used Penance, then yes, you can go into using Clarity of the Will. But again, it's not as effective as Shadow Men, Penance, or just even applying a shield and then going into doing damage. So when you start off the match, it's okay to stack up 2 Clarity of Wills on the target. You can stack it up to 2 times, making a really big shield. And then you can reapply it later when your team is stabilized, you're not actually needing to heal, and you can't really do any damage. Then you can go into using Clarity of the Will to keep your team a little bit more tanky, or during times of reset. But do not use it on the target when you have Shadow Mend up and they're at like 20%. It's not going to help you, and I kept making that same mistake over when I was trying to learn. Now, as far as comps go, you have the classic priest comps, right? You have Rogue Mage, that being Arcane Assass or Sub Frost. You have Jungle, which is also doing really good right now, that being Feral Hunter. You can even do like Fire Mage Feral. People are still playing Prot Paladin Feral. You have a lot of comps. You can heal Vanguards. You can heal almost anything as a priest. And right now, priests are doing extremely well. They have abilities like Purge. They have Mass Dispel. They have Mind Control. They can keep up offensive pressure. Their mana is doing quite well now. They heal for a significant amount. So in my opinion, if you are a more experienced healer, and you've been playing healers for a long time now, you played Resto Shaman, you played Paladin, maybe you played a Monk, an Arduid, I would give Disc Priest a shot. It took me a while to get the hang of it, but I am really enjoying this class, and I'm looking to play it a lot more going into the next season. They're also extremely good in 2v2s as well. But that's gonna do it for this video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you have any more questions about Discipline Priest or anything related, you can leave in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you guys right away. Try this on my YouTube and Twitch live stream where I answer all of your guys' questions in depth. Do not forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.